Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar, Practical Steps to Risk Maturity. My name's Trevor J, I'm the Technical Sales Manager for Risk Decisions, and I'm joined today by Susheel Chumber, who's our Global Head of Customer Delivery and Support. Between us, we've actually been working for Risk Decisions for over 35 years, so we've got one heck of a lot of stories to be able to tell you about how we've helped our customers improve their risk maturity. Seem to have most people on. I think we seem to have quite an early start for people over in Australia. Thank you very much for joining us. So what we wanted to talk about today is, first of all, what is risk maturity and why is it important? But then most of the time, I'll be chatting to Susheel about how Predict can help us increase risk maturity across our organisation. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of the examples that he's had helping hundreds of organisations implement Predict to improve their risk maturity over the decades. Crikey. We should have some time, hopefully, for question and answers. If you do get any questions whilst we're talking, please put those into the chat and we should be able to get to those at the end of the session. And just before the Q&A, there'll be some handouts made available as well that hopefully you'll find interesting when you download those. So, risk maturity, what's it all about? Well, here's an example of a scale for a risk maturity assessment. As you can see, along the bottom here, we've got a number of different areas of associated with risk management, and they've got a number of scales, and I'll talk about what those different scales mean in a moment. But essentially what you're going to do is somebody who will come in and check your risk maturity or audit it will have a review of all of these different areas and give you a score based upon the level they believe you've achieved. And your overall risk maturity rating is unfortunately based upon the lowest of any of those levels. In this case, the treatment of risks is the lowest, therefore it's just made it into this organisation's just made it into a level 2. So we'll just have a look at what sort of things those levels are. So we're looking here at the ad hoc level, the lowest level, and here the organisation, the people within it are just almost unaware of the need or of any of the benefits of risk management. There's no structured approach to dealing with uncertainty and risk, which almost invariably leads to a series of crises for be it individual projects or the operation as a whole. If there are any successes, it depends. It's often purely based upon the competence and heroics, and I love that phrase, the heroics of individuals to actually make things happen. And I think this sort of really comes down to projects being delivered purely based upon firefighting heroics rather than mature risk processes. Getting on a little bit further, people are beginning to get aware of the benefits, and a team or a couple of teams perhaps on individual projects are actually experimenting using risk management more formally. But really this is normally driven by a small number of individuals, and there's no way there's any formal or structured process in place across the organisation, or is it repeatable at all? Brings us on to level 3, repeatable. Here the benefits are far more widely understood. The organisation as a whole is really wanting to get risk management working, and here it's now been implemented as part of routine, and this is one of the keys. It's routine project processes, routine business processes, and our favourite phrase, and the one we'll be really concentrating on today, is engaging all stakeholders. What we want to look at is how we can gain that engagement to help people move up to the level 3 and level 4 maturity ratings. However, still, as we're only at level 3, the application across the organisation, or perhaps even within large programs, may be somewhat inconsistent. So if you then move on to the top level, we've now got a fully risk-aware culture. It's proactive, structured, and a very consistent approach to risk management. And this is across all areas of the whole business and all areas of major projects and programs. Everyone knows what they're doing. They've got clear roles and responsibilities. And the risk management process has got properly established links to other processes throughout the project, program, even the whole organization. So those are examples of 4 levels of risk maturity. But why is it important? Well, I've taken here an example that a customer of ours, QinetiQ, presented at one of our risk community events. And they're talking about the application of in this case, the QinetiQ risk maturity model. You'll see down at the bottom here, they've got 4 levels, perhaps slightly different interpretations of the intricacies of each individual level. But what they've been looking at is how, when they've been implementing risk maturity improvement programs, effectively moving over time here, the aim of those, of course, is to move organizations up from the low level 1 up to the level 4 of maturity. But the interesting thing is, what they noticed is that, when people were at the low level here, they were hardly the low level of maturity, then most of the time they were finding that cost overruns were happening or time overruns were happening. But as things moved off, the maturity increased, then the number of overruns decreased. And that really is the benefit of having a risk mature organization, be it business overruns, project overruns, etc., be it cost, time, or even failing in terms of quality. Then improving your risk maturity is a great way of reducing the potential impact of those. So as I said, one of the things we're really keen on and trying to show you with real examples today is risk engagement. So what do we actually mean by that? Well, I think one of the keys is that when people across the organization are engaged in risk, the risk managers don't manage risk. It's the risk and action owners that manage the risk, and it's these people that we need to get engaged. Risk managers, being risk experts, they might be some of these heroes in the earlier maturity levels that are actually managing to make things happen. Right? So if we can get the risk and action owners engaged, then the risk managers are now in a position to be adding far more value across the organization. They've got now the time to look for hotspots and anomalies. They can be helping identify and assess risks, but in fact, more importantly, identifying and assessing and improving mitigation or hopefully exploitation actions. And they can also be governing the risk process, making sure that the right data is being captured and it's being kept up to date. They can easily check that things are up to date so that when decisions are being made against that information, they know it's up to date. So the question is, of course, then, how do we engage these risk and action owners? Well, when we started developing Predict 5 with our new user interface, instead of just talking to the risk subject matter experts, we went out and talked to some of the what we call sort of the ad hoc, the infrequent users. These are the people whose risk is not part of their day job. It's just something they have to do to try and keep the risk information up to date. So we said, okay, what is it that would help you be able to manage your risks more effectively so that it wasn't impinging so much upon your day job? And the first answer we got was, you have to make it easy for us. Yeah, we don't want too much on the screen. We only want to be presented with the information that we've required to fill in. But also, tell me what I need to do. Prompt me about the risks that I need to be updating, the actions that I need to be updating. Help me. Yeah, tell me what it is that needs updating in individual risks and things like that. And then finally, make it easy. Yeah, and I think that's one of the keys. Hopefully, for the rest of this webinar, you'll be seeing how easy Predict is to use. But given that, Susheel, how can we tell our users what it is they need to be doing?
Thank you very much, Trevor. I'm definitely getting the message through about making it easy. Just to get everybody in Australia and the Southern Hemisphere used to how we're feeling up here. We've got snow at the moment. Is it?
Well, that's my garden.
So I'm just going to start off with an email actually that Predict has sent me because you don't want to spend your entire life in a software tool, but you do want to know when it's time to go in and do something. So I've got an email reminder here. I've changed my name to John Smith. I've got 2 overdue risks, got an overdue action, and I've got a hyperlink that will allow me to get straight to Predict and log in and get to my dashboard and see what risks I have to review. Now, the reason I started with the email is that in the upper 2 levels of risk maturity that Trevor was referring to, he talked about engaging people, proactivity, and that kind of thing. So actually, you don't want to wait till the end of the month for people to come in and update their risks. You actually want to make sure people go in when they need to. And one of our clients, Femin, in Denmark, they're building a tunnel between Germany and Denmark, quite an exciting project they're running there. And their risk team, the people are overseeing risk, is 2 people. So they need the system to help people to know what they need to do and for them not to be doing that. So let's have a look at these couple of overdue risks I've got here. I can open that up to see what they are. And I'll see I've got 2 risks. And in fact, one of my risks has got a mitigation action against it as well. So I can quickly see which risks I've got to review. And clicking on the hyperlink, I can go and look at that risk more closely.
Yeah.
And it's really easy system to use. You just go in and update the fields that you need to update. Now, I've shown you 3 things already in the space of a couple of minutes. And one of our clients in the UK, National Grid, who distribute energy across the UK, commented that they can usually get people up and running on the software within about 10 minutes. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the onboarding for new employees is about 2 hours long. It means I can get a group of 10, 15 people together, spend 10 minutes showing them how to use the tool, and then spend the other 1 hour and 50 minutes talking about how to do risk. And that's a really important part of risk engagement. If the software tool sort of blends into the background to a certain extent because it's so easy to use, you can start engaging the users in the job you actually want them to do, which is risk.
So concentrating more on the why we want this information, what we're going to do about it, will get them far more interested in just a technical, this is how to use a tool.
That's right.
Won't it?
Yeah, that's right, Trevor. And actually, National Grid, in a different way to Femin I mentioned earlier, they're a much larger organization. They've got hundreds of projects. Their Predict database contains about, tens of thousands of risks. And so they've got lots of people managing risks on a day-to-day basis. So it's really important for them to be able to allow those people to get on with managing those risks without much help. Now, one of the ways in which Predict helps you once you're in a risk and wondering, well, okay, I've got a risk for review. What do you want me to do about it? I've got a little warning triangle up here.
Yeah,
tells me exactly what I need to focus on. Now, this risk is in a mess, as you can see. I've not been doing my risk management. The risk is past its review date. I've got fallback action past its review date. Mitigation actions past the completion date. So actually, there is a lot to do here.
That doesn't sound like you,
Susheel. No. Well, I spend so much time in these sessions that I'm not managing to manage my own risks, actually. But the usefulness of this is, of course, it's drawing people and leading them towards what they need to do. Again, you don't have to worry about trying to work out how to work the tool. The other useful button here is follow, actually. Our client, Femin, in Denmark, going back to them again, being a small team, they want to give the power to the end users to be able to follow risks that they're interested in. So Predict has notification-based, event-based notifications. So you can alert people about things that happen to a risk. You choose what they are. As an example on this risk, which I get notifications about, I've been told to get on and do something about it. Somebody's not very happy with what I'm doing here.
I'm not surprised given how many things are out of date
Absolutely.
on it and what you showed earlier.
And that can be done by email, or you can see actually I've had a notification here as well. So while I'm logged in, I can also see an alert here that somebody's made a change to a risk that I need to know about, and I can proactively go and look at it. And that means I'm not waiting till the end of the month to review my 5, 10, 15 risks, however many they may be. I can do them when I need to review them, not waiting until a bow wave on the 31st of March.
That notification there, you're showing you're the risk owner. You've been sort of notified you need to do something about it. But I can see that could be important, sort of almost the other way around, so that perhaps somebody who owned a project that had lots of risks in it would be told. Could they be told automatically if risks had their score changed or something, rather than having to go in and check every now and again?
And then again, you get an email with a hyperlink, and you can click on that and go straight in and look at the risk and explore in a bit more detail what's happened.
Yeah. So sort of nudging people to keep doing things when things are needed, at whatever level they are. That's great.
And again, you decide who gets a notification and what events trigger those notifications to those particular stakeholders. In fact, it's good you mentioned some of the people that aren't maybe owning the risk themselves, because you mentioned stakeholder engagement in the higher levels of risk maturity.
Yeah.
And, people use social media. They're used to that as a way of engaging. In other ways, if you want to know if somebody's had a particular sandwich that evening, you can find out instantly via notification. Why aren't we doing that in risk management?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing I'll point out here really is actually it's quite a simple screen layout. I've got one field for describing the risk, but actually the organization that I'm working for in this example has simplified risk management for the users. But you can call the fields what you like. You can split this out into cause and consequence fields. Organizations actually I've worked with, as they've evolved, have made more fields visible as they've gone along the risk maturity journey that Trevor mentioned earlier.
Right. Yeah. So back to the user saying only show me the fields that I need to fill in. That can change over time as well, is what you're saying. Yeah. And the words that you're using will be the terminology that they're already used to as part of from their particular organization. So again, it just little things like that just make it easy and just people feel at home straight away.
That's right. Yeah. You can rename all these fields, and you can even change the help. If you use a field in a particular way, your risk process or policy is different to the out of the box standard, you can tailor that.
So it can actually be describing more about why we want this information and things like that, rather than just And
again, the journey of risk is made really easy. So on the left, you've got some very, very simple fields about the current state of the risk, and on the right, you can follow the journey of its score from its initial assessment when it was first approved and went live, through to its current assessment where it is now, and the mitigation actions that will each get it to its target assessment. So we're aiming to get this score down to 6. And actually, again, you can click on the risk score, and you can quickly see where on the scoring grid that risk sits. And that'll be tailored to your project or your organization.
Okay. Well, that's good. So that's looking pretty easy to me to for a person to update an individual risk. But a lot of the time people are using or trying to update risks in risk workshops. How would we go about
so let me show you another view here. So my folders lets you browse your organizational structure. So right now here, I'm looking at the house project. It's a project I'm working on to build a house. Not quite as grand as the Athletes Village for the 2012 Olympics, who they run multiple folders of risks. So they were building multiple plots. Some are very similar, some are very different to each other. And they wanted to move away from the idea of doing their risk reviews in Excel. And a feature like this, working in a list, you could conduct your risk reviews directly inside a list, going through each field and modifying it. You can see the risks are sorted by score by default, descending. If I modify that risk score, I can update the probability, the impacts, and the earliest expiry date. So all the details about what drives that risk score. And same with all of these other fields. Now, the usefulness of that is that you can then easily move between projects in Predict and run workshops with different people, whether it's on MS Teams or in a meeting room. The other thing you can do is you can share lists, create lists for other people to use as well. So actually, if you want to work collaboratively, you can create lists that you share with other people that can also access those lists. So I'll just answer your question that popped into the chat. I thought I'd take the opportunity while I was here.
Yeah. So just a minute, if you're doing that, is that just sending a list? So yeah, whoever I send this list to would see, just a minute, I'm looking, you've got 14 items there. Would they just see exactly the same 14 items?
Yeah, they'd only see what they're allowed to see. So it would still enforce the permissions.
Oh, right.
So I'm someone who can see these risks.
I think that's probably what I was asking, actually. Yeah. Would they see risks that they couldn't? Yeah. Got you.
Okay. And again, this is back to stakeholder engagement. And also just making the life of risk owners really easy, because when you're looking at a list of risks, however you've tailored it, you can filter, you can get the particular risks you want up on the screen, and then you can perform Monte Carlo analysis of them, for example, or you can export them to Excel, get that downloaded, and what you see is what you get. So you can choose the fields, the columns, and filter the risks in the way you want. Now, the really useful thing,
that really is what you see is, that's even down. You've even got the colours in there.
That's right. Yeah. And actually, one of the really useful things about this now is that I can send that to somebody, an external stakeholder that I don't want to give them access to our IT infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
So actually, back to risk maturity, a good sign of risk maturity is when you're starting to engage your subcontractors, for example, and other external stakeholders in your risks, and not just something you're doing inside your own organization. And actually, with a list like this, those people could update those risks, send the spreadsheet back to you, and that can be uploaded, and you can update the risks inside your risk register with updates you've received from external stakeholders. Okay. So that's really quite useful.
Yeah, very. See that.
Again, ties into some of what you've been saying around engaging people in risk.
Yeah, the stakeholders aren't necessarily just in your organisation, are they?
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, this is easier than Excel. So one of the areas of feedback we get. In fact, I give myself this feedback because every now and then I've used SharePoint to work in Excel files, not for risk because we use Predict at risk decisions, but when you're working in compliance or governance, you've got these really big spreadsheets. You're scrolling to the left, you're scrolling to the right. You're hoping that somebody else also hasn't got the file open, or you're locking it so somebody else can't open it. So it doesn't promote collaborative working. It promotes a very sort of siloed way of working. And actually, a multi-user system like Predict allows people to work collaboratively, update different risks at the same time, and also to jump into meetings and move around between projects. Because you can actually, I'll show you in a moment, you can actually search for risks as well and start cross-referencing them across. In fact, I'll do that now. Search for wages.
Yes, please.
See, I found 4 risks already that mention regulatory changes in wages. Now I can start linking those risks together, having risk conversations. That's really difficult to do if you're in a large organization and you've got 100 spreadsheets dotted around in SharePoint, for example. No, because you can choose your columns, then you can limit to the fields that you're interested in updating at any given time, depending on the type of workshop you're having.
Okay. I think a while back you were talking about the athletes' village and how it was a long process and lots of people were moving around between different plots and things like that, or even moving out of the organization. So what would happen if, say, somebody owned some risks and then they moved out of the organization? Would you have to go into each risk individually to find a new owner?
So another way in which Predict will make your life easier is something called bulk update. And in fact, many of our customers, like people like Athletes Village, would benefit from this. BAE is one of our clients where a lot of people will move between business units or between projects. So in fact, one of my good friends, Owen Ostrich, I met him at the zoo. That's where we recruited him. He's about to move on to another organisation. Very sad to leave him. Moving to another zoo, in fact. And I've created a list here called Owen's Risks. So I mentioned earlier that you could tailor and create risks, lists, and then update them. So I can select all of these risks here. I can do a bulk update, and I can reassign the owner, somebody else. Now, the interesting thing you'll notice here is that there's a tick box here to send notifications. Now, it would be a shame for the new owner, Dido here, to wait until the risk review at the end of the month, if that's the way she's working, to suddenly find she's got 10 more risks that she didn't have before. So this will send a notification out to Dido or whoever needs to be notified based on the events you've chosen, letting them know that the risk has changed.
Yeah, those notifications, little nudges all the time. Yeah, that's it. It's not very nice to assign people risks and then not tell them about it. Yeah, I think it's
all back to engagement and risk culture again, because this all, as you say, nudge. I like that word. It nudges people towards a more involved culture in dealing with risk, rather than a reactive or, I guess, looking at your maturity level 1, ad hoc, running around like headless chickens.
So I like that. I like the bulk update bit. Actually, there's a comment there that somebody said that they've seen it and they see it's a great feature. So thanks for that, Nat. You've been in a workshop there. You've been looking at risks and things, but you meant in your detail thing, you talked about actions. Would I be able to edit those in the workshop as well?
So you can either pull up a list of actions that you've designed yourself if you're just looking at actions. If I go into my folders, I'll quickly show you how you modify a list. Here you can choose your columns, for example, put them in the order you want. But I'm going to use these simple tick box filters to enable all my open actions and add them into this list in order to do a risk and action workshop. Because I think the thing you're getting at here, Trevor, is that I'm missing the management part of risk here if I haven't got any actions.
So, if you're not, it's the actions that do something, isn't it?
So there's an action there. I can edit that one, and I can go and look at it, update its description and all the other fields here as well.
Oh, your spelling's not very good.
No, it's not actually.
At least it tells you.
Absolutely.
At least it tells you. And
actually, again, this really comes then down to about roles and responsibilities and accountability, because you've got action owners, you've got risk owners, and you can design, answering somebody's question on the screen here, you could tailor notifications based on what the event is. For example, someone's added a comment to a risk, someone's approved a risk, someone's created a risk. So there's various sets of events that you can tailor, and then based on each event, you can say, I want to let the owner know, I want to let the project manager know, those kinds of things. I want to let the people who are following this risk know.
Okay, I can see that now. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I think that's been a great little look into how easy Predict is to use, which is one of those key things that our ad hoc users said they needed. And straight away, you showed us how it helps them know what they need to do, but not only just by getting those emails and things, which are the reminders about dates and stuff, but when you're in the system as well, being notified of changes that are happening having that warning triangle, which is really useful, just to give you a summary of all of the things that need to be done to keep that information up to date.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've actually gone over our half hour already, and we've had a few questions. Let's see if there are any other ones that are sitting there at the moment that we can have a look at before we finish.
I think in answer to
I think after we were talking.
Sorry. In answer to Gail's question, this might be another webinar we do. You've asked about what functionality there is for looking for patterns of risks at the portfolio level. So this webinar is more about engaging the risk and action owners, but certainly look out for a future webinar on the next level up.
Or in fact, if anybody wants to put into the chat other subjects they would like in webinars, we'd see what we can do about those as well. But we can't, we don't want to make webinars too long and cover too much, so we try and make them short and specific. Okay. There was a specific when we were asking about risk lists and sharing them. Somebody said, "How do you actually do that?" Well, it's an interesting one, that because we had to
easy. I can
give you as part of your list, you can decide whether to share it. But in one of we did get a request from a number of customers to be able to actually restrict the ability to share lists as well, because they didn't want everybody sharing hundreds of risks with everybody, lists with everybody else as well, and making it difficult for people to know which list was which. So we're always trying to make things again as easy as possible, not overloading people with lots of lists. Okay. Yeah. There was also a question that I'm not quite sure I understand that came in about, this is showing us how we can engage people in risks. The key questions are measures of risks. Are our measures of risks that accurate? All right. What deviations are captured between models data on the one hand and reality of actual business? Ooh. Yeah, that is quite an in-depth question at the moment.
I think that might be another session.
Yeah, it might be. It's interesting. I think you said, you're in the finance and investment industry where risks are underestimated all of the time. I don't think that's just the finance and investment industry that they're underestimated. If you see how many infrastructure projects are late and things, I think there's a lot of underestimating going on in those as well. I mean, you can always, we do allow you within Predict to capture your estimates, and then when if a risk does actually occur, then you can compare what the actual impact is to your estimates of impacts, and you can keep that information in history, so you can go and compare those ways, having lessons learned folders of risks that have occurred and things like that. So that's one of the ways of doing it, but perhaps it needs more of an individual chat around that one, which we'd be happy to arrange at a later date. Okay.
Okay, we missed any questions?
I don't think so. It was. I'm just amazed. Susheel and I did a similar running of this earlier on today, and we got hardly any one or two questions. And here we're running out of space on the chat thing. I think so. It's been brilliant to have so much more interaction. Thanks for that, and apologies for people who said they had troubles joining and earlier. I hope you did manage to get.
We do have another question's arrived here, Trevor. I see how you're. See how you're engaging risk and action owners. How can it help me as a project manager? So there's that layer of role, isn't there, that sits below the people who are overseeing risk management and the governance of it, and the risk and action owners. So if I go back to my
that's a great question.
Yes, if I go to my dashboard here again, this is my risks, but I can take a project view dashboard. If I move with this arrow to a project dashboard, you can see here that things aren't looking good. It's not just me. It feels like, I think, Trevor, on that maturity scale, I think we're probably to the left.
I think you're after some heroes at the moment. I think you need them.
And actually, we've got one of our customers at Electronet in Australia. In fact, they're sort of the equivalent of National Grid in the UK. so involved in the energy sector. They won't, at the time we delivered this to them, they won't run a risk review if the risks weren't up to date, because what's the point? Get people to get their information up to date, then run a risk review. So yeah, this is a project level dashboard for the house project, telling me that I've got plenty of risks that are overdue and actions that are overdue. Lots of draft actions that haven't been approved as well.
Crikey. It's definitely not your project, Susheel. It wouldn't be in that sort of a state, I'm sure. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. That's been great. Thanks all for the interaction. I hope you found that useful. And if anybody has got any further suggestions for topics they want, I'll quickly put them in the chat now before we finish, or send us an email either to any of your Risk Decisions contacts, or even through to enquiries@riskdecisions.com. Thanks again for your time, folks.
Take care.